So we're in YouTube now. It is, I'll do this, yeah. So you ready?
Yep.
So hello everyone and welcome to Ibi Speaks. My name is Ibi Speaks and welcome to another episode of Ibi Speaks. So today's episode, we will be talking about everything you need to know about sending your child to school in Canada. And my special guest is Canadian educational consultant, Karen Perez. Karen?
Yes, nice to be here. Wonderful platform, lots of information to share about studying in Canada. So let's take it away.
Fantastic. Now, I just want to say thanks everyone for joining me today. I'm absolutely delighted. I thank all of my viewers, all of my subscribers, and all of my first-time subscribers. And if you're watching us today and if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. Your subscription means a lot to me. And I'll also like you to like the channel as you watch, like it, and feel free to share. Now, we're going to go straight to the point. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Karen? Why should I send my child to school in Canada?
Let's see. I think the advantages are many. So first of all, you need to stop and think, is this something that I plan to do? Send my child overseas. So you have options. You have traditionally the UK. Geographically, the UK is close. It's a maybe 5-hour flight. You have the United States of America, a little bit further, but a lot of Nigerians have family, friends, or have traveled to the United States. And then you have Canada. So Canada is an option. Yes, it might be a little bit further, but the reasons are fantastic. Canada is a safe and secure, relatively safe and secure place to live.
Yeah.
Study. So you talk about safety and security as, you know, something that's important when considering sending your child. Quality of education is there. And that's what we want. If you're going to invest in education for your children, you want that quality. You want that quality because it's not cheap. We'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
So in going with quality of education, Canadian education degrees, credentials are recognized worldwide. You can take that Canadian university degree and it's recognized anywhere. Unlike many university degrees from other countries are not necessarily recognized, for example, in Canada. You have to top up with further education, so on and so forth. But the Canadian education credential is recognized worldwide. Another reason is Canada's immigration friendly.
Yeah.
We all know that, you know, we are a small population. We're looking for good, solid international students to start their life in Canada. So it's a good pathway. It's a good pathway to immigration in Canada.
Oh, fantastic. I like it when you say, you know, that, I like it that you touched on, you know, that, the UK is closer to most, you know, especially for people who live in Nigeria, America also, but then that Canada has very good educational quality of education, and it's safe and it's very friendly, immigration friendly, and I like that. Now, as a parent watching, I am sold to the idea of sending my child to school in Canada. You've said, you know, very interesting things that would make me say, wow, I think I would like to send my child to school in Canada. So what then would be the appropriate age to send your child to school in Canada?
Okay, so once you've determined that, yes, Canada is a destination where I'd like to send my child for those reasons, quality of education, immigration friendly, safety and security. Now you need to look at, okay, what is the institution? What is the institution that I'm going to consider sending my child to? Or, you know, if you're an older an older person, maybe a graduate, and you'd like to study abroad, you need to consider the institution. That's very, very important. So when you consider the institution, you also have to consider the age. So if we look at somebody who is maybe coming out of SS3, they're about to round up, they're going to do WIAC, they're ready to go on to the next level. So at that time, it would be appropriate to send your child. So yes, you can send your child before that, but there's financial implications as well. But traditionally, the parents that I've been dealing with for many, many years, once the child is rounding up with SS3, the next level comes up. Now is the opportunity to send your child to Canada. But before doing that, do your research. Where's the school that I'm sending my child? What is the quality of that school? Because much like any country in the world, there are schools, there are institutions that don't have, Nigeria itself, they don't have the highest quality of education. So you want to ensure that the quality that you're paying for is there. Now, if it's a university, likewise, you do your research. There are universities across the expanse of Canada. Canada is a very large, very, very large country. And tuition cost is always a factor in everybody's decision. So again, in your research, look at the costs that are involved. You can find universities, accredited universities with that standard for as little as $10,000 a year tuition, up to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for the same degree. So the location could play a factor. Some of the Eastern Province universities are a little bit less expensive, well, considerably less expensive, but if you want to call it a downside, I wouldn't necessarily call it a downside, but the location isn't in the center of the country. So if you travel out a little bit further, you can find less. Quality will still be there. 100% guarantee the quality is still there. But because of the distance, the location, the Canadian government subsidizes those universities and it brings down the cost of tuition. So these are things that you look at when you research the institution where you want to send your child.
Karen, I want to go back to the appropriate age to send your child. So now you've touched on of course, the university, which is very important. So assuming I'm sending my child who's just finished SS3, for example, I really want us to talk about that, because I know that having to do a foundation is very, very important, because statistically about 60% of children who go into the first year do not make it into the second year. And we don't want that for our kids, do we?
No, that's something that you want to avoid. So again, you go back and you have your child that's in SS2 or they're in SS3. As I said before, the next step is university. Right? Yeah. So now they can apply to university in Nigeria with their WIAC. So they sit for JAM, they can go on to enter university. The same parents by default think the same thing. Well, if they're going to Canada, they finish SS3, I'd like them to enter university there as well. Well, that's where, good research, good consultation, as however you would call it, this is where that comes in. Because as you say, I think it's over 60% of first year university students don't make it to second year. And I'm not talking just Nigerian students, I'm talking all
globally. Yeah.
So it's quite competitive. University in Canada is quite competitive. And if you think about it for a second, the Canadian university degree is recognized worldwide. So there has to be that standard. That standard's got to be there. So it's survival of the fittest. And admission to university is not really that difficult at the end of the day, but it's that survival, that getting past the first year. If you, traditionally speaking, in my many, many years of doing this, if you can make it through first year of university, you'll make it through the rest. But it's that first year where students aren't prepared for the rigors of university and the competitiveness. So this is the reason why students need that foundation. A lot of parents, especially Nigerian parents, they want their children pushed through. They can finish. I've seen kids who have finished WIAC at 15 years old, sometimes even 14 years old, and they want to push them into university, get them through. But they're not doing them any justice, because it's very difficult to, as I say, to survive in university. Yes, you can get an admission, but it's that survival that's critical. So how do we decrease the risk? How do we increase the survivability in university? And that is after students do their SS3, put them in a foundation, give them a 1-year foundation where they can learn in Canada, of course, in Canada, where you're getting that solid Canadian, because there are foundation schools in Nigeria, but you're not really getting that quality of the Canadian education system. You understand? So put them in a foundation, let them do 1 year. Even if your child, like many of my Nigerian parents have said over the years, my child is first class, my child is a sharpshooter, they don't need that foundation. Well, I've seen otherwise. Contrary to that. Kids that come from good, solid educational institutions in Nigeria, they come to Canada, they still struggle. Still struggle. And the parents are like, what's going on? My child is top of the class. Why are they now struggling? There has to be something wrong with the instructor in Canada. It's not that at all. It's the system here it's different than it is back home. It's different than it is in Nigeria. So give that child the opportunity to get that foundation. And a foundation is the same whether you're building an education or you're building a house. You have a solid foundation. You build that house will stand. If the foundation isn't solid, that house is not going to stand. And it's the same way with education. So doing the foundation, again, it gives you methodology. It gives you the opportunity to understand the Canadian culture. It gives you the opportunity, whether you're a science student or an art student, to learn that, physics and calculus and further math and English, not necessarily spoken English, of course, but English literature and so on. It gives you those a solid base in those core subjects, which you will need now to survive, so to speak, in university. So do your child a favor. Everybody wants to save a dime. Everybody thinks that their child is strong, put them right into university. Why do I need foundation? But the benefits are plenty. And then you have a lot of options. Once the child is in Canada, then you have the opportunity to research universities and look at different options, look at scholarships that are available for those sharpshooter kids, which are there. Not necessarily so when the child is still in Nigeria. Are you going to have access to scholarships? But once they're in Canada, there's a lot more opportunities.
Yeah, and Karen, I still want to go back to the foundation schools, because like I know, for example, you and I know, for example, that we have fantastic Canadian schools. So we have the boarding, we have the day schools, and we also have the international schools. And as a parent, trying to send a child to school in Canada, and when I do my research, I obviously is going to come across, I'm going to come across, all of those options. So
right.
So what would be your take when I'm looking for schools?
Yeah, again, that's your research. Right? Do your research. So in Canada, as you said quite correctly, the options are Canadian. You send your child to Canada. One of the reasons, we go back to the very first sentence, one of the reasons that you decide on choosing Canada is for that quality of education, world-renowned, standard quality of education. right? Now, you want to be careful, again, when you're doing your research, look for a standard in the school that you decide to send your child to, not because so-and-so has their child went through that school and this neighbor went there through that school and my friend's son went through that school. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a real quality of education. So in Canada, you have the typical traditional Canadian school, whether it's, now so remember, we're focusing on foundation, which is essentially grade 12. So in Canada, we have 4 years of secondary school. The final year, which is grade 12, is the foundation year that students will do. So that's the final year. So even though, yes, they finished SS3, in their eyes, they finished high school. In the Canadian system, the last and final year is grade 12. And that's where students who are university bound will do those advanced level subjects in preparation for admission to university. So that's where it's typically 6 subjects. Typically 6 subjects in 1 year, starting in September, ending traditionally in June. That's the Canadian curriculum. So again, we have the Canadian day school. Canada's not a school of boarding. There are boarding schools in Canada, but traditionally they're not for Canadian students. Traditionally, they do exist, but they are, they're not traditionally. So a traditional Canadian school would be a day school. Monday to Friday, classes start at 9 a.m., finish around 3 in the afternoon. So that's day school. The other option that you would encounter would be a Canadian boarding school. And this is typically where boarding, yes, is, students live on campus. It's full boarding. They're there 7 days a week. Again, starting in September, finishing in June. But these are for the, let's say, should I say the elite? So in terms of cost, you're going to get, trust me, you're going to get all the bells and whistles, but somebody's going to be paying for those bells and whistles, and it's going to be parents. So again, you would have this essentially the same curriculum at a boarding school than you would at a day school. But as I mentioned before, all the bells and whistles that parents are going to be responsible to pay for. So the cost can be upwards of maybe 3 or 4 times the amount of what a Canadian standard education would cost you. So quite expensive. And this would be maybe children of diplomats who are in Canada, or children of high-end business people. They want to send their child away to that, unlimited resources, so they can give their child that. But for the average person, they're not really something that parents, the typical parent, would be in search of. Why? Because the Canadian education in and of itself is standardized, and the quality's there anyway.
Yeah, and I for me, now this is just a personal opinion. So I know that there is the boarding school, like you said, there's the day school, and there's also the international schools. But personally speaking, I'm a bit weary about those international schools, because I feel that they could be all about the revenue, and they may lack the actual Canadian quality of education. That's just my opinion, but that's just what I think anyway. So,
well, again, in doing your research, you will be able to discover these things. So in an international boarding school, for example, is it predominantly Nigerian? Is it predominantly Chinese? Not that there's anything wrong at all with those markets, but are there Canadian students in that school? And if there's not, why are they not there? Why would a Canadian student? So they're just for international students. So they're generally private. They're not that typical Canadian, standardized, typical Canadian education. Yeah, that's just it. So again, this is where you do your research.
Yeah.
What's the student body? You know, marketing, anybody can market, anybody can put out a fancy flyer, give statistics and whatnot. But again, it's all in doing your research. Have somebody that's reliable that can maybe vet a particular school for you, right? If you have relatives or friends in Canada, can they go and knock on the door? Can they walk into the school and take a look around and see, is this a boarding facility, or is it just, is it just a house where they pile in all these students to sleep? Is that their boarding? What's the safety and security? What are the meals like? What's the supervision like? There's a big difference between Canadian boarding schools and Nigerian boarding schools. And that's another issue that I've encountered for over the many years that I've been doing this, is in Nigeria, you send your child to a boarding school, the child is there. They traditionally can't leave the facility. So they're there. Yeah. Yes, they leave on holidays and those certain times of year where they go home
on holidays,
for 2 weeks on holidays, but traditionally they can't leave. Well, in Canada, it's not like that.
I know, right?
You have to be back in the boarding house by whatever the set time is, 10 or 11 p.m. So the doors are open. You're free to come and go as you please, because we can't keep our students locked in a boarding facility in Canada. It doesn't exist. So parents think they're sending their children to boarding. They're going to be locked up in there. Meanwhile, they're out at the mall, they're at the shopping center, they're at parties. If they don't come home, what's going to happen? So these are all the things in doing your research that you will discover.
Yeah, and it's very scary to send your 17 or 18-year-old child out
or
there.
15 or 16-year-old.
And you're thinking, oh, my child is in school, and then, oh my God. So we've hammered on that. Thank you so much, Karen, for that. So we've talked about the appropriate age, SS3 and all of that. So when should be the right time then to apply?
Okay, as I mentioned,
before before the exam, after WIEC or before WIEC and stuff.
Okay, so say you are considering sending your child to Canada after SS3. SS3 typically starts in September. So you would start the process the January before. So if my child right now is in SS2, right now as we speak, and they will go into SS3 next year, this coming January, I would start the process against admission for September 2023. So it's a good 8 or 9 months ahead that you need to look at the process.
Sorry now, so 8 or 9 months process. But Karen, I have these questions for you. Are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but I'll just ask it. So which is more important, standards of the school or a place where the child can get the desired support and care depending on their age? For instance, one may have family or friends in a particular city or area where they can help you put an eye on the child versus looking for a school where the standard or quality is far away. Mm-hmm. Doing your research, where can you go to get the credible information and advice?
Okay, well, obviously somebody like me who has that exposure to Nigeria, who has traveled to Nigeria, who has, understands the culture and what parents want. Now, something very interesting, you talk about sending your child to maybe perhaps stay with a family or family friend or a relative that might already be in Canada. Yeah, at first thought that sounds like, it sounds logical. I have a sister, I have a family friend, they're Africans, Nigerians are very hospitable. Let me see if I can just send my child and stay with them. Well, in my experience, it doesn't usually end well. Canada, we don't have the luxury of of services, people to help us with anything like you do back home. So for example, you have somebody that helps with the cooking or the cleaning, or a driver, or so on. You have a lot of services. You have the luxury of that. We don't have that here in our culture. So we are responsible for our cooking and our clean, hard work, and our laundry, and our grocery shopping, and taking the kids to school and picking them up, and all these things, plus working full time. So we're very, very busy. It's difficult now to bring somebody in and then be responsible for them, because it's a big responsibility to monitor a child. And teenagers, even parents themselves, your child maybe has been in boarding school for since maybe junior JS1, they've been in boarding school. They haven't been with you 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So they've relieved you from that huge responsibility. So now how can you put that responsibility on somebody else? Yeah, your family friend may say, oh yes, send them to us. But it's a huge, huge, huge responsibility for those people. And as I say, it often doesn't really end well. Yes, they can go and visit these people on holidays, on Christmas break, summer break. That's fine. But I think you should put that child somewhere where they can be monitored appropriately, where there's no unbiasedness, if I can say that. Right. So what happens if the child so, okay, let me give you this kind of a scenario. The child's living with a family friend, and maybe you're not paying this family friend. Let's just say it how it is. Maybe you're not paying this family friend the amount of money that you would be typically paying if they were staying independently in an institution. So you're not compensating them. And meanwhile, the child is going out, the child's got the latest iPhone, and the child's got the latest, $300 tennis shoes. They're eating at McDonald's every day. They're jumping around, picking up Ubers, and they're, dressing in all the, flexing. All this.
Yeah, that's the Nigerian English.
He's not going to be happy. They're not going to be happy. They're saying, listen, here we are. You've got your child living with us. We're struggling. And the costs of living in Canada are quite high. Food costs, everything is high. So here we are doing you this favor, and here's your child. We can't afford the latest iPhone, but here's your child living with us that has the latest iPhone. Like there's something. So this is when the resentment starts to build up. Leave your child someplace else, someplace independent, where somebody unbiased is monitoring that child. There's no emotional connection there. You understand? So that's sort of my take on leaving them with family and friends.
I understand that perfectly well. And we're going to go back to that. Mm-hmm. Now, so we've talked about, again, because I want us to be very methodologic. I don't know now. I want us to be, how do they say it again? Okay. I don't want to bite my lips. So precepts upon precepts, line upon line. So we've talked about the appropriate age. We've talked about when is the best time to apply, which could be do that before the results come out. Yeah?
Yes. So prior to their WIAC results coming out is perfectly fine. So WIAC results usually come out around that May, June, July, even sometimes August. So you apply in January, you get your admission. And then once you get your admission, that's when you start the visa processing. So by the time WIAC comes out and you actually come to Canada, that's when you will need those WIAC results, is when you land in Canada and they can give you equivalent credits for what you've done.
Oh, perfect.
So
perfect.
Long before WIAC is even written is when you start the application, because as I say, it takes a long time to get there. So if you're starting in January, it's against resuming school in September. So everything has to happen leading up to then. So, and it's a long process.
Fantastic. Now, thank you very much for that. Now, the next thing is going to be the visa and the cost implications.
Yeah, before we go into that, delve into that, which, that really should be at the very beginning, because it's really paramount. It's quite, it's one of the most important aspects in studying in Canada. But before we go there, I just want to touch on the school, doing your research. So you have the Canadian, world-renowned Canadian education system. Those are those Canadian schools. Tuition is about $10,000 a year. Of course, you have accommodation and feeding on top of that, but you're getting that world-class education, right?
Okay.
So there's the Canadian, but
that's for the foundation school, right?
It's for foundation, yes.
So,
okay,
sorry,
but remember, it's day school. So what do we do about accommodation, right? And because the fees are relatively low, again, you're looking at $10,000, 10,000 US a year tuition. You have to have accommodation and feeding. So attached to that would be the homestay program. And this is where students would live with a Canadian family. You understand? So they would go back and forth to school. Typically the school is located near where the family lives.
That's the host
this
family.
Is something that I have been organizing, something I've been managing, something that a very integral part of what I do that I've been doing for many years. So of course, typically the Nigerians right off the bat would say, oh, geez, are they going to take care of my child? Is there going to be any issues? I don't know who these people are that they're going to be living with. But, if you have somebody that you trust that is going to be monitoring your child, going to be orchestrating this admission, going to be directing you to good, solid Canadian educational institutions, this is part of what they do. Myself included, this is part of what I do. So these homestay families are managed by me. They're contracted by me. They work for me. So these families take care of what I would consider my students in the manner which I dictate, which I believe is appropriate. Do you understand? So the meals are given, they have their own room, the laundry is done by the family. The family is just basically there in a supervisory role. Typically, you can't really say typically, but sometimes there are children in the family, sometimes there aren't. Often it's a single woman. Maybe her husband is late, or she's on her own, her children are grown, she has the house, she has a couple of extra bedrooms, and she can house these kids. So in my opinion, it works out really great. Yes, it's a higher level of supervision, but then you know where the child is at all times. They're not being monitored, for example, in boarding school. Oftentimes the monitoring is done by the host peers. So there's a residence prefect, and they're doing the nightly checks. Is the student in their room at such and such a time? Well, that kid, it's it's a peer. It's just another student. Yep, they're there. Yep, they're there. Meanwhile, the student is out and, comes in the morning. So all these kinds of things can happen. But when you have that homestay environment, number one, it's managed by somebody like me. So I'm the person that supervises the whole issue, the whole scenario. If the homestay family has a problem, he's waking up late, or he didn't go to class, which rarely ever happens, but those things are immediately reported to me. And then I pick things up and I would speak to my students saying, what's going on? You're sleeping in late, you're late for class, or you've missed a class, or you're sleeping after school until midnight and then you're up all night, those kinds of bad habits that sometimes happen. I'm the one that's there to monitor that. So there is a good level of supervision. There's also a relative amount of independence as well. Kids with permission can go out, they can visit a friend, they can do after school activities. So it's a good, solid environment. This helps to keep your costs lower. So all in all, you're looking at about, for that particular program with day school and homestay, you're looking at about 25,000 Canadian dollars a year. Translate that into US, it's $1,000 a year, or in Naira, about 8 million Naira a year. And that's your tuition, your feeding, your accommodation. That's everything included. Now you go into.
Karen, are you sure if 25,000 US dollars, is it 1 million Naira a year? Are you sure? 8 million. Okay.
8 million.
Now, Karen, before you, I just want to understand something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I understand what you're saying because it happens in this part of the country, where in my own side of, in Ireland, for example, you know, we have what we call the what's it called now? We have
homestay or host.
I forgot the host families. Right. So now, listen, I really, really, really love this conversation because I'm thinking as a parent who is in Nigeria and who has to send their child to go to school in Canada.
Right.
As a mother, I'll be worried about because even my own kids went to boarding house here as well. And sometimes on Sundays, weekends, they're allowed to go out. And I'm like, what? I thought you're supposed to be in the boarding school and you're going out. But so that's the culture. So right. You're saying that, you know, it will be nice to have your child, of course, in the boarding school, but nice to have your child in a supervised environment where you have a host family looking after your child. And you've been in that business for over 20 years of organizing those kind of services for parents in Nigeria, yeah?
Correct.
So what you do basically then would be to make sure that the children are properly placed, you know, in those home state families, and you can organize the parent-teacher meetings, you supervise the child, you know, under strict, you know, guardianship, you know, and you kind of like are able to track the child's academic progress and all of that. So do you do that for both university or just for the foundation?
With university, it's a bit different. It's mainly for foundation, because that foundation is where you want to mold the child, where you want to prepare them for life in university. You know, the laws in Canada and America as well, you know, everything has a law. So confidentiality is huge. Even parents themselves, if they were to pick up the phone or send an email to the university, nobody would talk to the parents. Nobody would talk to you. It doesn't matter how much you're paying for your child's tuition, that you're the one that's paying. Nobody, for confidentiality reasons. Now, when the child is in secondary school or foundation or pre-university, things are a little bit different. There is somebody that is responsible for that child. And that would be, for example, somebody like me.
So you're the mama.
I'm the mama, right, right. It's pretty, I think, how do I say this? Unique, what I do. Very, very unique position that I'm in, because not only do I recruit students, I can guide them, I can counsel them. For many years, I've had students who have actually lived with me. I've had years and years of experiences doing this. Of course, I can't have every student living with me. So that's why I have homestay families. And I trust those families. They've been taking care of my students for years. You know, they provide good meals, they provide good supervision. They're not there to be an authoritative person towards that child. They're not there to be saying, do this, don't do that. Parents set the rules.
Okay.
And the family, the host family, is only there to monitor and ensure that those rules are being followed. If they're not following the rules, the homestay family will contact me. And usually I'll talk to the child and say, hey, you know, your parents want you in by such and such a time. You know, you've got to do what your parents are telling you to do, because if you don't, I have to report back to your parents. Usually that snaps them back into shape, right? But so the homestay family is not there to be disciplining the children. They're just there to provide a safe, secure environment for that child. It's me that does all the background communication with the parents. This is what your child is doing. I've gone in and I've met your teacher, your child's teachers. I can monitor what they're doing in class. I can walk into the school and see the child in school, which I've done on many, many, many occasions, and then feed all that information back to the parents. So if I know what the child is doing, I know the friends they're keeping, I know where they're going in the evening, I know what they're doing, because I also have this connection with the homestay. Right? So the homestay is also reporting back to me. It might sound like a lot, but it's really, I believe it's a really healthy environment for these kids, because you put them in boarding school and that's it. Again, it's just like they're just with their peers. They're just with their friends. Nobody's there really monitoring you. And if your child doesn't make it, is not focusing on their studies, well, they're just going to have to spend another year, which is just going to cost you more money. So my particular mission is to make sure that these kids are here doing what they're supposed to be doing. And with the years and years of experience that I've had traveling to Nigeria, living in Nigeria for every year for several months, having my own daughter in boarding school in Nigeria, I really have a bird's eye view. I have a very distinct knowledge of what Nigerian parents want for their kids.
And Karen, really, that is the reason why
it's not much different than what I want for my own child, right? You want your child, what more can you give these kids? What more can you give them? How many houses can you live in? How many cars can you drive? But you were investing this money into your child's education. You want results, period. You want results.
And Karen, that's the reason why I wanted to have you here on Ibi Speaks today, because I am passionate about making sure that when parents send their children to go to school abroad, that their children go to school. Because we've heard a lot of stories where parents would send their children to school and the children would spend years upon years and they end up not
even attending school. Not even attending school.
Yeah, and I find that very, very heartbreaking. That's why I thought that it was important to have you come on Ibi Speaks to highlight all of these things and also to let people know that there is a service like that. Now, I want us to go then, and thank you for that information. I'm sure some parents will find that very helpful. So I want us to go to the next crunchy issue, which is the visa application. I think that I also have a question about that. So let me just check and I'll read it. It says here, somebody says here, what will the embassy require to grant you visa? But again, there's a comment that says here, homestay family is the way to go. They help enforce the rules the parents set. So that's somebody applauding that homestay family and applauding the services that you provide.
Fantastic.
So fantastic. And I also really like that as well. Now, we want to talk about the next crunchy issue, which is the visa. What will the embassy require to grant your child visa to study in Canada? Listen, I want the secrets, I want the tips, I want the mistakes to avoid.
You want the cold hard facts.
I want the gist.
You want the gist.
Thing.
Yeah.
Blow by blow.
Yes. Without a visa or a study permit, okay, those are two different things, but let's just call it a visa. Without a visa, nothing's going to happen. So there's no point in researching schools. There's no point in looking for homestay. There's no point in, doing anything if the child doesn't get the visa. So let's just clarify the difference between the two. So one is a visa, one is a study permit. The visa is what allows you entrance into Canada. And the study permit is the purpose that allows you to stay. So you could have a visitor visa. So you're coming in, the purpose now is to visit. You could have a work visa or, a visa, and you could have a work permit. right? So if you get this, there are two different things. So there's the visa, which allows you admission into the country, and then your permit, whether it's a work permit or a study permit, that's the reason that you're being allowed to stay. So when you want to send your child to Canada, you apply for a study permit. Now, this is a big one. And as I said, really we should have put visa right at the top of the list, because it's the most important aspect of everything. Because as I said, without the study permit, without the visa, the child's not going to end up in Canada. So there's nothing really to talk about. So how do you qualify for a study permit? First of all, you have to have an appropriate institution that you're going to be attending. That's not really difficult. Most institutions are accredited, but you have to have a letter of admission from this institution. Now, most people believe that with an offer of admission or a letter of acceptance that the visa is guaranteed, and that's not the case at all. That's only one of the requirements needed for a visa. So of course you need to get your offer of admission. So when somebody applies for a study permit to Canada, the application is put together with all the supporting documentation. And that supporting documentation will tell the immigration officer a story. It's all going to be there. It's going to tell a story. And this immigration officer is going to make their decision based on the story that they see. So based on the evidence that you bring to them, they're going to determine whether or not you are what they consider a bona fide student. You're applying for a study permit, so they want you to be a bona fide student. You're not 39 years old or 42 years old and want to come to Canada to study because you can, and you apply for a study permit. Meanwhile, you've got a wife, you've got children. You're not really a bona fide student. Or maybe you've been out of school for 10 years and you think, geez, I got to get out of this place. Nothing's happening here. Let me just go to Canada. I can pay my tuition. I can show my bank account. You're not, in Canadian immigration eyes, you're not considered a bona fide student. Yes, there's no age limit to studying. People who are 60, 70 years old have contacted me and said, I want to study in Canada. I say, well, you can't, you don't really, what, do you mean I'm too old? No, you're not too old. You just don't fall in the profile of what a bona fide student is. So going back to the beginning, Canadian immigration wants desperately to bring students into Canada to study. We want them. We want them, hands down. There's no question asked. We want them, whether they're from India or China or South America or the continent of Africa. We want smart international students to come and improve the fabric of our country. They're young.
I love that, to improve the fabric of our country. I love that.
Yes. Canada only has a population of about 30 million people. 30 million. That's just a little bit more than the population of Lagos itself. United States of America, to give you a comparison, is at about 300 million. Canada, 30 million people. And we have, as you know, flying from one side of the country to the other is about 10 hours. 10 hours. That's almost to London and back. That's just across once across the country. So we're a huge country. We have a very low population, and also added to that is the population of our seniors. You know, there's a huge profile of people right now that are about to retire. Those are what we call the baby boomers that were born in the 50s and 60s. Those people, there's a huge gap of people that are about to retire. We need to fill that gap. We want young, healthy, solid people who will come in and make us, continue to make us a great country. So we want international students, but we want the right people. We want the right people. And that's what the immigration office needs to determine, is this person coming in to study in Canada, or are they coming in for other reasons? Like perhaps maybe their plan is to file for asylum. In that case, you won't get visa. So how do you prove now to that immigration officer that you qualify, that you are a bona fide student? Number one, most visas are given to those kids who are coming out of SS3, right? They're 15, 16, maybe 17 years old. They're coming here to get an education. They're fully dependent on their parents. They're not coming here for any other reason except to get an education. But can the parents afford it?
Yeah.
Right? Can the parents afford it? Because I've already told you the cost of studying in Canada is about 8 million naira a year, everything included. So if you're making 4 million, you're making 5 million, 6 million naira a year, you're not going to be able to afford that. So your visa is not going to be approved. Simple, simple, simple. So if the parents are now sponsoring their child, their annual income should be around that, I would say around that 25 million naira.
Wow.
And I know it's big, but if it's 8 million a year, you have to take care of your family at home as in addition, right? So this is one of the number one factors around visa denials. You don't meet the requirement. You want to go out and buy a Range Rover. You want to go out and buy, a high-end vehicle. You want to go out and buy a property. You better have the money or you're not going to buy it. It's just that. It's the same thing with sending your child to Canada. If you want this, you better have the money to pay for it. So never mind doing bulk deposits into your account. You're going to have to bring at least a 6-month bank statement that shows where your money's coming from. So forget about bulk deposits, dropping 10 million or 15 million naira into your account, because there it is. They can see right there, you've dropped 10 million a couple of times. So you've got that money in your account. It's not going to work. They want to see flow. They want to see where your money is coming from. If you're a business owner, bring your CO2, your CO7, your certificate of incorporation. Bring those documents that shows that you've been running this business and where your money's coming from. Simple, simple, because then you have diminished the risk that something's going to happen if, this child comes to Canada and school fees can't be paid. Right? Diminishes that risk on Canadian immigration. That child will go back to their country because they've got something to go back to. In the unlikely event that something happens and you can't afford to keep your child in Canada. You understand? Because things can happen. God knows what we just come through a pandemic. God knows that things can happen where suddenly you can no longer afford to pay your child's fees. Well, we don't want that child filing for asylum. That child will come back because they've got something to come back to. Are you getting me?
I do. That's why I'm nodding.
Yeah. So the immigration officer is going to want to look at whether you can sustain your child in Canada. So it's simple. If the cost is 8 million naira a year, your annual salary should be around that 25 million. Now, how do you prove it? As I said, bring your CO2. If you're a business owner, CO2, CO7, show those business documents, landed properties, show that you've paid your tax clearance, show all those things that will convince the immigration officer that you've got what it takes to support your child in Canada. Simple. And as I said, just be careful of those bulk deposits because those are red flags. Don't do that. Bulk deposits are
red flags.
Red flag. And what else? So you've got the admission from a credible institution, the financial. So now, okay, so parents may say, well, you know what? I don't really have that money, but somebody that I know can sponsor my child. Or an uncle can sponsor my child, or an auntie can sponsor my child. We're talking straight here. You're taking a big risk. Why? Because that uncle needs to take care of their own family first before they're starting to take care of your child. So yes, honestly, I can say that I've had that situation where an uncle has sponsored, a nephew. It's success. I've seen it myself. It does happen, but it's rare. So that uncle should be, very, very, forget about 25, forget about that 20 to 25 million naira income, annual income. It should be up closer to maybe 50 if you're going to be sponsored, and it should be blood relative.
Okay.
So never mind uncle this, uncle, my auntie, my uncle. It should be blood, and you have to be able to prove that it's a blood relative. And perhaps that uncle has been supporting that child since, right? Has been paying school fees, but you have to show evidence. So these are the kind of things people say it's very difficult to get a visa to Canada. It's not difficult if you meet the requirements. If you meet the requirements, and it's quite simple and straightforward. What Canadian immigration doesn't want is for people to come into Canada and not to be able to be taken care of, right? So that's the question that they're asking themselves. Is this parent able to sustain their child in Canada? Simple. Another thing that you want to show Canadian immigration is perhaps travel history. We've been to the UK. We've been to the US. We've come back. My kids have traveled out for summer. They've come back. All those things help to create a story whereby the immigration officer is satisfied that your reason for sending the child is bona fide. Yes, down the road, immigration opportunities come up. That's fantastic. As I said in the beginning, Canada's an immigration-friendly country. We want young people. We want sharp minds. We want people that can contribute to the society that we have here. But we have to make sure in the beginning that these are suitable people that are going to come in. So you also have to have medical, right? That's standard. We don't want to bring somebody in that's not up to par, because again, that would be a drain on our system. So you go through medical, you do biometrics, those things. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Now, Karen, I want to ask you this question here. And you said something, and I just want to take you up on that because I don't want to confuse my listeners. So we talked about, you said that that the visa thing should have come up first. I mean, on the top before we talked about even just the admission. So when should be the best time to apply for the visa? Because obviously without having the visa, the person can't go to school.
Exactly. So you've done your research, you've found a school, you've applied to the school, you've got the offer of admission. This is the time now to apply for a visa. So if you're starting the process in January, you should have your admission by February. Okay. Now, when you apply for your visa, my advice to you is to pay that 1 year tuition up front.
Okay.
Pay that. Yes, most schools.
Before the WIEC results are out.
Absolutely. Before you apply for visa, you should pay that 1 year tuition in full, and you have the receipt to attach to your visa application. If you have done your research and you're in a credible school, you will 100% be refunded that money if the visa is refused. If the visa is refused, you will be refunded that money. If you think you can apply to one school, get the visa, and change schools, you probably won't get a refund for your tuition. So you need to be careful about that. But 99.9% of schools will say, yes, you will get a full refund if the visa is refused, and you show them evidence that the visa has been refused. So that's really important. And Canadian institutions aren't concerned about visa. They will give anybody an offer of admission so long as you qualify for an offer of admission. They're not concerned about visa. So yes, they may ask you for half-year tuition. half-year tuition. And parents will say to me, well, look, they're only invoicing me for a half a year. Well, don't do that, because you're giving immigration another something to be concerned about. Pay that 1 year tuition. It's done. It's paid for. So that's really, that's, I think, quite key.
Okay. So if I understand you, do the research. Sorry, somebody's trying to come in. So do the research, get the admission, apply for the visa, whilst we wait for the WAEC results to come out. Yeah?
Yes.
Very good. Now I want to talk of something else. I know we've talked about it, but I want us to be, again, let's put the figures down. I want to talk about the cost implications. We've talked about it, but I want us to be systematic, listen, I'm going back to this word method. All of a sudden, Karen, I can't pronounce methodology. I can't pronounce it anymore. Okay, can you pronounce it for me now?
Methodological.
Very good. So
right.
Methodologically, I want us to put, because, you know, like, I don't know maths, you know, so sometimes when you talk about the figures, it goes up, 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 up. So I want us to say the cost implications of sending your child to school in Canada. The foundation school is $10,000 tuition. Then you have to talk about the accommodation and all that. So if you're using the homestay family, so ballpark would be what?
Okay, so if, you know, their prices vary, just like school fees in Nigeria vary, they also vary in Canada. But I can guarantee you, you can get world-class institution, homestay accommodation. That whole package would come in at about $20,000 for the year. That's your world-class education, but it's the homestay that's attached to it. There's no overhead. There's no bells and whistles. There's no staff to be paying, no residents, you know, electricity bills and AC and all these other bells and feeding and whatnot. So that I can guarantee you, at $20,000 a year, your child will get world-class education that's attached
plus
to
homestay. Now again, the prices will only
go up. That price will only go up because once you get into boarding, whether it's a Canadian boarding school or international boarding school, the price is going to increase substantially. So the international boarding school will probably come in at around maybe between 30, 35,000 a year. So that's about a $10,000 difference. And you may not be getting the real quality that you think you're getting. Let's just kind of leave it at that, right?
Okay.
Now, if you jump up to the Canadian boarding school, you're looking at starting about $60,000 a year, 60. That's with all the bells and whistles, right?
Very good.
You're going to have a Friday uniform, and you're going to have a band uniform, and you're going to have a weekend uniform, and you're going to be paying for all those things.
All the fluff.
All the fluff, but the classes will still be the same. Yes, you're still going to be taking those 6 advanced level subjects, the same subjects.
In Lagos, they will say it's all the feferity. So you're paid for the feferity.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so then the universities would be, you could get the Eastern Province, it could be from 10,000. That's the tuition. What about the accommodation and stuff like that? Because
you want to set aside about $1,000 a month for feeding and accommodation. That's kind of a low sort of benchmark price. $1,000 a month. So university starts in September, it ends in April. That's 8 months. So you're looking at about another $10,000 on top of your tuition. Now, again, those Eastern Province universities are world-class, recognized universities, government universities, and you can compare that to the University of Waterloo, those University of Toronto. Those are very high-end in terms of tuition. Yes, the quality is also good too, but unless you have very, very deep pockets, tuition comes in at around 45, 55, between 40 and $60,000 a year. That's just tuition. Just tuition. So that same degree, for example, in engineering, you can get in the Eastern provinces for $10,000 a year, or you go to one of the high end. Nobody at the end of the day is going to say, which university? Oh, so you went to this university. At the end of the day, unless you're really, 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 really a high flyer, Canadian university is Canadian university. You know, their standard
I like that.
Exactly. Their standard is across the board. That's that Canadian university degree that you want, that Canadian education that everybody talks about. That's what you want. So it's up to you what you want to pay.
Yeah. Do you want the fairy, the name, or you just want to be practical like me?
Right.
Okay. So I get that. Now we've talked about the foundation. We've talked about the undergrad. I want to talk about somebody who is listening and who wants to do a master's. And you've talked about that, but then I want us to just, so I have a child who's 25. Mm-hmm. And I want him to do a master's degree in Canada.
Okay, great, great. Again, you know, we can just jump right to the most important part in this, and that's visa, right?
Yes.
So you have a child that's 25 years old. Who's going to sponsor this child? Who will be the child's sponsor? So a boy calls me from Lagos and says, oh, good afternoon, Ma. My name is Oluwafemi. I want to study in Canada, master's. I just finished from Babcock University not too long ago. I want to do my master's. I say, okay, how old are you? I'm 25. Who's your sponsor? My father. Okay. How did you finish? First class, second class, third class, second class upper, second class lower. I ask these questions. Yeah. Oh, okay, I finished second class lower. I said, well, you have to be careful because masters, generally they want second class upper and above for masters, admission to masters. So what's the alternative? There are other options in Canada. For example, the PGC, postgraduate certificate, very viable, solid education, not as aggressive in terms of admission as a master's program. But going back, who's your sponsor? My father. What does your father do? Oh, he works for this company, that company. What does he make? I don't know. Come on, you have to know. Okay, have you traveled? Oh yes, we've been to the family vacations in the UK. We've been to family vacations in the US. I have a pretty good idea that they would qualify for visa, even though
so Karen, I want to ask this, and I'm sorry to cut you short. So what if I have a family member or somebody who is listening and who hasn't sent his or her child abroad, but wants to go to school in Canada? Does it mean that the visa problem would be there?
Okay, same thing again. The same thing with the SS3 graduate. The father or the mother's annual income must be up there, that 25, 30 million naira a year to sponsor your child, right? Even though the child is a graduate. So the typical pathway for somebody that wants to do masters is they've done their first degree, they've done 1 year youth service, they have maybe 1 or 2 years work experience, and then they go. But if you're sitting around after your youth service 5, 6, 7 years, you're not going to get a visa. You're not going to get a visa. And God forbid you should say, I've been working for 3 or 4 years. I can pay my own school fees. Don't ever do that, because you've now deemed yourself independent. And Canadian immigration doesn't want to see that. They want to see somebody who is responsible for you. Okay. That's a huge red flag. So all these kids that are 25, 26, 27, oh, Miss Karen, I've paid my own school fees. I've got 10 million naira in my account, or they do a bulk deposit. You would never show your own account as a student. Never, never, never show. You want somebody to sponsor you, and it should be your parents. So you get the picture, right?
I do get the picture. Now I have another question for you.
Yes.
So I went back to do my master's after 24 years of graduation. I had to do the mother thing first, and I had my own gig going. So if I want to, so there's a woman in my shoes, for example, who wants to go back and do, well, I want to do masters. So, and maybe she's like 48, 49.
Okay, good. Remember what I said to you about giving the immigration officer a story.
Yes.
Right? What, it doesn't matter what you're applying for, how old you are, if your story makes sense, you will get a visa. If it doesn't make sense, you won't get the visa. That's just it. So you have a woman who's 45 years old. Maybe she's raised her kids. Her husband runs a business. They are solid, right? Okay. They have their property in Lekki, right? The woman runs a business.
Hi, you know Nigeria very well.
The man runs a business. The family has gone. They have travel history. They can show their last 3 or 4 or 5 passports. They've gone, they've come back, they've gone, they've come back, they've gone, they've come back. Those things stand a much better chance, right? Than somebody who is, 42 years old, has never traveled, nobody really is the sponsor, those kinds of things. As I told you before, just put your mind to the fact that the immigration officer we don't want to bring somebody into our country that we have to be responsible for.
Get it.
That's the bottom line.
I get it.
So if you can prove to them that you are responsible, that somebody responsible is taking care of you, at 40 years old, it's tough to get to, to start. I'm not saying that it's not possible. It's possible, but your story must add up.
Yeah. I think so too.
Your story must add up, because Canada immigration has been through a lot in the last, number of years. And let's face it, if we're calling a spade, the Nigerians have come into the US, they've walked across the border into Canada, they've filed for asylum. So now, unfortunately, today we're suffering the fallout from that. So everybody is leery. Everybody wants to make extra sure that if you're sending your child to Canada or you're coming to Canada, it's for the right reason. If you don't qualify, look at another option. Go on Canadian Citizenship and Immigration website and look at other programs for immigration, because they're there. But don't apply as a student when you're not a student, because you'll just be refused, and then that refusal will forever be on your immigration file.
And you don't want that, do you?
You don't want that.
Okay, fantastic. Let me see. Listen, I had loads and loads of questions, and we have touched on a lot of things. And again, another question, I think we've talked about it, but I want us to talk about it in detail. Tracking your child's progress. So for the foundation, if your child is in the foundation level, then you could have the homestay, parent, which you provide those services to help track the child's, progress. But if the child is in university, how would you advise the parent to track that child's progress?
Yeah, that's really important. And let's face it, it's work. It's work.
It is work.
Parents are busy back home, busy trying to make money. I know people that work in the banks, they leave mainland at 4 o'clock in the morning to beat the traffic to get to their office. They stay late in their office to beat the traffic. They're not home until 11 or 12 o'clock at night, only to start again at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I get that parents are very busy, but it's something that you have to do. Every student has a platform, an online platform connected to their school. Right? So they have a username and a password. It's all there. Get your child's username and password. If they're refusing you, and I've had this situation, if they're refusing to give you their university or their school username and password, they're hiding something. Bottom line, they're hiding something. And if it was my child and I said, I want your username and password, and they refuse it to give it to me, I'd say, well, then you pay your own school fees. That's just it. If the child is not giving you their username and password, then they are hiding something. That's just it. And if you are paying for your child's school fees, your child's accommodation, you deserve to have access to that. And there you'll be able to see everything. Their grades, their attendance, what's due, what they've failed, what they've passed. You'll be able to see all of that information there.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two is get them to sign a release. Consent release for you as the parent. Every university has it, because parents will not be able to communicate with anybody at the university unless you have written consent on that file. So as I said, yes, it's difficult, it's time consuming, it's cumbersome, but you've got to do it. And if you can't do it, then you hire somebody, for example, like me, who can do it.
Perfect.
Somebody that knows the system here, that can penetrate, get in, get the information that is needed. It's much, much, much easier to do in the foundation and the pre-university. But once these students hit that university level, it's quite difficult to do. It's really quite difficult to do. But my mission is to make sure that these kids in that foundation year, make sure that these kids are set up to survive that system in university. So usually after foundation, they're on their way, you know, they're on their own. It's very difficult for me to be able to monitor the way that I can when they're in foundation.
Thank you very much, Karen, for that. Now, I want to check if I have some more questions. I'll see 1 second now. So there's a question here. What if the child gets a letter from a family friend in Canada that they will accommodate and feed the child and show their own statements? So all the parents need to pay is the fees. Will that work?
Not likely. Not likely. Not likely. No, unfortunately, again, I'm just saying it how it is. Not likely. Immigration wants to see that the parents are solid, because if something happens, God forbid, and those parents can't afford to keep their child in Canada, that child will go back to their home country. If there's nothing going on over there, that kid's not going back. Whether it's Nigeria or China or India or wherever they come from, they're not going back. That's just it. That's the risk. So you've got to show immigration that you people are solid, that you can afford to send your child to Canada.
Fantastic. Now, let me see. I don't know, question I want to ask. What's the question now? I forgot.
There's so many. Yeah.
Top of my head. What's the question I wanted to ask? Scholarships.
Yes. Big question. Big question that I always get asked. Well, after everything that I've said, you should now get an idea of where, you know, how my answer is going to come, right? If you're looking for a scholarship, everybody wants to get something for nothing, right? Nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking for scholarships, that probably means that you can't really afford to send your child to Canada. So in which case you wouldn't qualify for visa. But where scholarships now come in is when the child does the foundation, your kid, who is the high flyer, as you say, has proven you correct. He's now, or she now has 90, 95% GPA. She's been accepted to this university for engineering or computer science or medicine or whatnot, one of those high-end programs. If they are in fact a high flyer, those scholarships will come. Those scholarships
will follow them.
When the child is in Canada and has finished that foundation and has applied to university, those universities will offer that child a scholarship.
Fantastic. So going after scholarships before the child gets into Canada is a red flag for the immigration officer.
It's a red flag. It's a red flag.
Okay.
Unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
And it keeps within their mission to reduce the risk of those who aren't really bona fide students, right? So if you can't really afford to send your child to Canada, you're not going to get the visa. And that's why there's so many visa refusals. That's why, is because the bank statements, that income is not there. That income is not there. And as I said to you, and it's worth repeating again, forget about those bulk deposits, because if you're looking at a 6-month bank statement and you're seeing 10 million drop, you know the money's not coming from the father. It's not coming from his business. Or likewise, if you're an employee, you're a Shell or Chevron employee, or whoever your employer is, you need to bring evidence of your pay slips and a letter of employment from your employer saying how long you've worked there, whatnot. So we know, and then your salary is deposited into that account. So we're going to see, immigration is going to see where your salary has been coming in all this time. So you can't hide it. You can't hide it. So stay away from those bulk deposits, because you're just, you're
making things worse for yourself. Now, another question. Thank you very much, Karen. Now, because I'm very conscious of the time. Another thing that a lot of parents want to know is, of course, the immigration pathway. When I send my child to go to school in Canada, and they graduate from university,
what happens?
What's the pathway?
Very simple. As of today, sometimes it changes, but as of today, we have what's called experience class. It's one of the immigration pathways that are available. So it's quite simple. Students can come in once they graduate. That's the key word. They have to graduate from their post-secondary program. So not graduate from foundation. So after foundation, they go to university or to college. Once you graduate, you apply for what's called a graduate work permit. Once you have 1 year work experience, you can now apply for permanent residence.
And does that also apply for master's students as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have to graduate. That's the key. That's the key. You have to graduate from your program. So another really good option that I can quickly tell you about is students, for example, finishing SS3, they can actually go into a college program. And those are generally 2, sometimes a 3-year program. Again, solid academic option, solid institutions, solid education. It's just a different pathway. So I know Nigerians by and large will say, oh, that's Polytech. No, I don't want that. But I have students that have gone through this pathway. It's tried and true, and they end up being very, very successful. So
do they have,
So what you need for admission is WIAC, right? And they're typically those practical educational programs. So you can't generally come and do a 2-year program and get a degree, for example. They are diploma programs. So say for example, we have a student that wants to do study business, right? So they come to Canada, they do this is one pathway. They do foundation. They go in and do college. It's a 3-year program in college. College tuition fees are much less than university fees. Now, once they do a 3-year program, they can top up with a university transfer 2 more years, and they've got their degree. So to me, that's a phenomenal option, because not only do they have a college diploma, they also will top up with a university degree. So those kids are gold. Right?
Yeah.
Number 2, they can do their WIAC. Yes, they can skip that foundation year and go right into college. I'm a real strong supporter of that foundation year. It doesn't matter whether you want to go to college or university. I'm a really strong supporter of that foundation year, only because for the many, many, many years that I've been doing this, I see where kids come from. I see the challenges they have.
Yeah, and I'm a strong advocate for that as well. I'm a strong advocate. I remember when my little girl, my daughter, finished her SS. She's going to kill me. But I'm just going to say, forgive me, love. So she finished SS, the SSCE, and she did well in the SSCE. And I wanted her to come over, and I asked her to go back to do Form 5 and 6.
Right.
Here in Ireland, and she hated me for it. She hated me for it. But she eventually graduated with a 2-1.
Well, there you go.
Because I felt it was necessary for her to have that. Again, the Irish, understand the methodology of the Irish educational system. I wanted her to also understand the accents and understand the way they do things.
Right.
But she hated me. She was like, Mom. But here, she's graduated now. So yeah, so I think that it's important. I think it's good to
absolutely
do
our kids, Canadian, the education system in Canada is 12 years. So we have 4 years of secondary school. So our students finish secondary school when they're around that 17, 18 years old. Some kids even take a gap year off because they're still not mentally, emotionally prepared for university. So why are Nigerian parents pushing their kids out of SS3 at 15 and want to enter them into university? They're just setting them up for, disaster.
I think so. I believe you. I absolutely believe that as well. So quickly, I want to talk about the, again, because some parents would be interested in knowing, so the college, how much?
College tuition fees are about 15,000 Canadian dollars, around 15,000 Canadian dollars. So that's around 10,000 US a year.
But what about the Eastern Province?
I'm not sure the colleges there. I don't know what their tuition is, but say a university in Ontario, which is the province of Ontario. We don't have states, we have provinces. So the province of Ontario is where most things happen. You have the city of Toronto, you have University of Toronto, McGill University, University of Waterloo, Carleton University, University of Ottawa. You have those high-end big universities right in the center of the country. Those tuitions are around 35, 40, 50,000 a year for 1 year against college tuition, which is about 10,000 a year.
Yes. So if then, because you said that the Eastern provinces have even about 10,000 US dollars for universities. So I'm assuming that it would be cheaper in those provinces as well.
Probably around that amount. So if a parent decided to send their child to do college, you're looking at 3 years of college at about 15,000 a year. So say 25, so 25, 50, so 75,000 plus 2 more years of university. So 75, you can save a considerable amount of money if you, instead of sending your child directly to university, of course, after the foundation. So you're looking at maybe 50, 55,000. So that's about 200,000 for 4 years. And you can cut that down considerably if you decide to send them to do the college university transfer.
Perfect.
But that's not for every student. You understand? You need to talk, you need to do your research, determine what your budget is. Every family is different. Every family is different. Some parents are really, really heavily involved in their child's day-to-day activities, even while they're in Canada. Other parents, they just say, you go, I'll pay your school fees, but then you're on your own. So every family is different. Every family has a different mission. So just, talk to your consultant and find out what are the options, what's best for you, what's best for your child. A practical education versus a theory education. You want to come in and do a 2-year diploma in IT and get a job. That's perfectly fine. You can still become a permanent resident even after a 2-year diploma program. Or do they want that university degree? So it's all depends on what the family, I can't say what's good for your family. You can't say what's good for mine. So sit down and have a conversation and look at all the aspects, but just make sure that you choose a quality education and know your child. Know your child. If your child is an SS3 and their grades aren't good and they're playing around and they're addicted to their gadgets and this and that, you better have somebody that's going to knows how to monitor that child. Because another thing that I've noticed too, I know I'm talking a lot, but kids don't change. Whatever your child is in Nigeria, your child will be in Canada. That's just what I see. That's the cold hard truth. If you have a good solid kid, likes their books, likes to read, they're ambitious, they're looking towards getting a good education, they're going to be the same in Canada. They're going to, nobody loses their child in Canada. You would have had to have seen the red flags before. That's my honest opinion.
Right? I love you for your honesty.
Yeah.
So assuming somebody's like, okay, I've heard, and I want that extra supervision, which is a service that you provide, Karen. How do they contact you?
They can contact me direct. They even WhatsApp. They can call me on WhatsApp and I can have a quick conversation with them. Usually in about 30 seconds, I can tell you more or less if you'd qualify for a visa, right? Okay. And if you do, then we start getting into the nuts and bolts, right? Choosing an institution, choosing a location in Canada. How much monitoring do you want? What's your pathway? What's your idea? What's your budget? What exactly do you want? And if you want somebody who knows your culture, that knows what you want and can be able to monitor the child the way that you do, I'm your man. I'm your man.
Fantastic. So would you want to put your number openly?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. It's fine. You can.
Okay. So let me read your number out. So if you have a pen and paper, here is Karen's number, and you can contact her. One second.
Mm-hmm. +1, that's Canada.
Yeah. Oh, Canada. Yes, so +1 905 902 0439.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's easier than email because I can answer your call. We can just briefly discuss, whatever your situation is. I can more or less tell you whether or not you would qualify. My consultations are always free anyway. There's no point in bringing you in and putting you through months and months and months of rigor only to be refused a visa. I mean, it's not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed, but I can pretty much tell you whether or not you qualify. And there you go from there. As I say, nothing is guaranteed, but the obvious is there. You have that, a proper sponsor, you have perhaps travel history, it's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah. And so, Karen, I just want to say thank you so much for this session. It's been a very informative one, and I really, really, really liked it. And I would say, maybe you would come back again, would you?
Oh, I would love to. I would love to. You have this is my life. I want to see these kids come in, have this opportunity. It just warms my heart, right? What else can we give these kids? A good, solid education, but I want them to come in and do what the parents expect them to do, right? Yeah. Canada's a great country. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. There is no perfect, you talk about the weather, for example. Nobody dies from the cold.
That's my biggest problem.
Nobody dies from the cold. You know, I have kids here now. They're going to school. They came in last August, right? So here we are, August, September, October, November. They went through the winter. Now we're coming up to June and it's getting hot again. And the kids are saying, this hot is just too much.
I see.
They want the cold back. So there's no perfect world. Nigeria is not perfect. Canada is not perfect. We take the good with the bad, right? But we have a lot to offer here. We have an excellent education system. We are immigration friendly. We are, we have Nigerians here. We have Asians, Africans, South Americans. We have it all. And we all live side by side. We're a small population. We're friendly. So it's a great place to be.
I know.
It's a great place to be.
So yeah. So Karen, thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been patiently, who has joined us and listen. Thank you. And just to say that next month, starts from next week, Saturday, I'm going to be starting another series, and it's about fathers, and I'm going to have very interesting guests, and I don't want you to miss it. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. It's Ibi Enebi, and you can follow me on my Facebook, on my Instagram, LinkedIn, Ibi Enebi. And again, I have a website, ibinaboenebi.com. I have done much of it. I haven't done much articles since April, but then it's okay. I'm going to do some more articles. So thank you very much. And Karen, I'm going to call you. Yeah?
No problem.
So bye, everybody. And thank you so much. Mwah.
Bye.
What did you say?
Adupe.
Adupe.